Welcome back to Getting Ahead, not just getting a job. We're back in the studio with our team, so everybody run around in the room and just tell us who you are.
Katrina Anderson.
Novella. Star Clinton.
Carl Meyer.
Karen.
Michelle Mathis.
Misty.
And I'm Dwayne, and I'm back here just kind of facilitating this conversation. If you heard the last podcast, if you haven't, go back and listen to that because they build on one another in this series. There'll be about 5 or 6 in this series, maybe 7 when it's all said and done. But when we closed last time, we knew we had a group of people. We have everything from a person who's unemployed fewer than 24 hours to people who have background challenges, people who've opened nonprofits, all those things right here in the room, all those scenarios. So we're going to cover some of those as we go through it. But the focus of this session and these sessions is on building your own circle of connectivity, your own what we call social capital, so you are not tied to the standard way of looking for a job. So real quickly, let's go back around, just whatever order, and talk real quickly about a couple of those frustrations that we ended the last session with. And you won't have to elaborate too much on them, just kind of kick them back on the table. Somebody start us off. What were the frustrations that you faced?
I think it's the time it takes for people to, get back to you, either set up an interview with you or send you that robotic thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
That's really frustrating. And then why put in a resume if you're going to make me get there and have to fill out an application?
Right.
Why don't you just let me fill out the application and just bump the resume?
Yep.
Or you fill out you put in your
Or-
resume
right,
online, you still have
and
to fill
skip
in
that
all
whole
the
part.
information.
Wait a minute. What'd you say?
Oh, sorry.
Right, like they both said, like either resume or fill out the application. Like then you have to go back to your resume to figure out the dates where you worked at 5 years ago. Like
Yeah, Novella, you
that's kind of
said,
aggravating.
Online, when you upload your resume,
Yeah.
and then you have to go back and refill out all of
Right.
that information and probably do an assessment.
right.
It's time consuming.
And if it's a company of any size, significant size, much of that is read by robotics and artificial intelligence. So it gets even more complicated, as my dad used to say. So
I've had it's funny because even one of the companies I used to work for was really guilty about that, but I've always found it really frustrating if you put in an application for a job and then they call you 2 years later.
yeah,
Wow.
And then are you ready to work? No.
yeah,
One of my previous employers, my boss even was complaining, everybody he called wasn't available to work the job. And I'm like, the resumes are 2 years old. Well, if they want to work here, and I'm like, they've gotten another job by that point. But when you are ready to hire, that's when you should be asking for resumes.
Right.
And have a condensed time when you're going to hire somebody.
Right.
2 years later, when I'm getting the call, I'm not going to work for you.
and it's
Yeah.
kind of like putting a house on the market. If you leave your house on the market too long, it loses value. Well, it's the same thing. If you leave your resume out there too long, if you leave the job opening out too long, it loses its credibility. So part of what we're going to talk about is showcasing yourself to the right people. And we'll get to that. So here's the question. We've heard some of the frustrations. What are some of the action items that you take to find work? Now here's an example. You may go to a temp agency. You may put in an application online. What are some other things that people do traditionally to find work or that you have done? Just kind of spit them out.
Job training classes.
Taking what?
Job training classes.
Taking a class. And actually taking a class that shows you how to go find a job. And sometimes those are great, and sometimes they teach you to do the same thing everybody else is doing. Therefore, you create your own competition. What we do is built with Getting Ahead, not just getting a job, is built to be a mutually beneficial relationship building process so that you don't just get a job out of it, but the people you engage benefit from getting to know you. What other things do you do to find jobs? Temp agencies,
Sometimes
classes?
people put out there, like on Facebook, sometimes people ask if anybody knows somebody that's actually hiring.
Right.
But again, the challenges that come with all of that are usually the same thing. Do people know about job training classes? When you look at a lot of the websites and stuff, the bigger ones, LinkedIn, all that, some people don't know how to navigate that process. And then we keep forgetting in all of this beautiful, beautiful technology, there are people out there that don't understand none of this.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? They don't have that resource. They can't get to a place with Wi-Fi. They don't know how to upload it. They wouldn't know how to get the response back.
Yep.
They're just not connected like that. And even if you can get them connected for the moment, they can't stay connected because once they put it in, okay, if they don't have access to that stuff, how are they gonna follow up on it and then get into some of the jobs that are all, technical kind of jobs?
Because they don't have the capacities to do some of those things. What I'm thinking about as you're talking, Karen, is this. Our library has some great resources. Maybe for a video cast, we can go later to the library. We'll do this later in the future. Go to the library, bring in a couple of your clients who are willing and would sign the releases and all that, and show people how to access all of those things in the library on a regular basis. And the library staff, I'm sure, would help us with that. We have a phenomenal library system in North Carolina and an even more phenomenal one here in our county. So let's think about that as a
it's a lot of stuff we can put on the table. We encourage and folks that know us a little bit better, if you're doing something, we want to help support that.
Yep.
And people, however they need to, get outside and say, hey, I'm willing to help with that. I'm willing to go by this shop if I hear that name.
That's
I'm willing
right.
to show up for this event. But also, folks that do jobs, they have to realize something. You ask people that don't have resources to come to you,
Yeah,
that defeats half of the people that would even attempt
that's
to.
right.
But if it's one of you, why you can't go to them?
That's
Why
right.
you can't take your job stuff and show up at that place where all of where everybody is,
That's
and
right.
make it available to those that want. So it needs to be more of that kind of mindset.
That's right.
Going to the places. If you have a community that has a huge population, maybe like the homeless community, go to the shelter and do the applications and stuff with people there, rather than saying, well, if they get motivated, they get away there or something, they come to you and can put an application, because it's just a way to rethink it.
And we didn't talk about this in advance at all, but it's interesting
we did not.
that it's come up. One of the things we're doing at the Gateway, the Resource Connection Gateway, and you can find it at resourceconnectiongateway.com for our county only at this point. We've not expanded beyond, but we're going to. One of the things we've done is we have a volunteer named Adina who goes into the shelter twice a month and helps with housing and with career. And we've already seen one person get a job in the first couple sessions. There's value in going to people. Even if they don't have transportation, this man was riding a bike to work. That's how he got the job. He then got a car, and he was getting a car when he saved some money. So here's the question behind that. We'll talk more about the work in each community as we grow, but there are a lot of ways to find work. You can take a class, you can put in an application, you can talk to a friend, you can network, whatever that means. You can call, you can walk into a small business, a lot of things. Now, some in the room may have read this material and know the answer, so let's ask it and see if we get online and see what people think as they listen. If you do those activities, if you send 10 emails in a day,
Oh,
okay?
crap.
So-
I already know this answer.
Yeah.
Why do I not remember this? It's a lot.
So that's
It's
10,
a lot.
10 actions, right? So you've sent 10 emails. Then you make 10 calls. Now you've taken 20 actions. Then you
I should
send
know this.
10 applications online. Now you've taken 30 actions. How many, and don't say it if you know it in the studio, how many actions do you think you would have to take to get a single face-to-face interview for a job? You say, well, how do you know that? Well, here's what we did. We took 50 people, put them through a 12-session class like this, like you're hearing now on the podcast. Those 50 people were all chronically unemployed, 2 or more years, or grossly underemployed. They might have been working a temp labor job. We surveyed what they were doing. Interestingly, 45 of them got jobs when they applied our method. So you'll hear more about that in future podcasts. But we plotted what they were doing. So at home you may be thinking, well, how many action items does it take? Maybe it takes 30, maybe it takes 50, maybe it takes 100 to get a face-to-face interview. The actual number is 273.
Wow.
273
I was thinking
face to face.
700. I don't know why I thought 700. I don't know why I remember 700. Like, no, that's
So-
way too many.
It made
Star needs some water.
it made Star choke. Star couldn't believe it. She choked when she heard
Yeah, she
273.
heard over
She
there.
wasn't here the last time.
So the key is not working
in here.
hard. The key is working smarter. How many of you have ever had somebody say to you, "What are you doing to find work?" And you're like, "I'm working myself to death." Anybody?
Me.
Yeah. Almost every hand in the studio went up. So the question becomes, what if I could figure out a way to work smarter and not just harder, and capitalize on that capacity that these folks found at the 50, how 45 of them found work during the 6 weeks of the class that we did 2 times a week. We did this same material 3 months ago now, I guess, and we had 7 people in the class. 4 of the 7 were seeking work. 3 were just taking the class for their own personal benefit. All of those folks has found work now, all of them. And this was in a really a 60-day period through the holidays, I would add, through the winter holidays, the Christmas and Hanukkah and all that time holidays, which is the time usually it's the hardest to find work. So what do you think you can do to work smarter? Any thoughts? What are some ways you could work smarter? Would you?
Well, you used to be able to just walk in and fill out an application and have an interview and actually see somebody, but coming back to what she said about Indeed, it's like a computer bot thing that just like, I don't know,
Yeah.
groups people in places
That's
with their
right.
experiences and what they can do. But
Which, what I'm hearing
I
in
mean,
that,
I could almost talk anybody into anything if I could go in there and sit down, I would get a job. But versus a personality versus a resume is 2 completely different things.
think about it. A resume will not get you a job. It might get you an interview.
It might.
But I really spend minimal time with career builders on the resume. It's a necessary essential, but it won't get you a job, especially in today's market.
No, you
But-
gotta be personable. You have to be.
And Misty
Approachable.
set this up perfectly. She said, if I can get in front of them, I can convince them. What if, and this is what we're going to cover in the next podcast, what if you could get in front of the right people so that at the end of the day, after a certain amount of search time, you have 3 or 4 jobs that you select one of them or 2 of them rather than just taking one. And it seems like, Misty, you sent me a text several months ago and said you had 3 job interviews on a day and you were going to take one of them. Was that you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had 3 job interviews and you got to kind of choose which one fit you best.
Yeah.
At the
They fired
time.
me yesterday.
But we'll work through that. We'll work through
That's
that.
okay. It's
So-
okay.
That kind of brings us to the
I deserve more money
conclusion.
anyway.
Yeah,
Like,
that
I
brings
worked
us-
too hard for that little bit.
We need more job offers, so if you're looking now, you go ahead and flood the airways with job offers right now.
Right?
For Misty
Hey,
and others.
Facebook Live. I'm forklift certified. What's up?
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do in the next podcast is talk about how to build that network. We're going to get into the real meat of this in the next podcast. So be sure, come back, pick that up. Podcast are at resourceconnectiongateway.com. So let's break for now. We're going to take a break in the studio and we'll be back with the next podcast soon. Welcome back. We're continuing our series, Getting Ahead, Not Just Getting a Job. And we've covered some great material. So I want to remind you who's in the studio with us. I'm Dwayne. We've got Misty over here. Tell us your name as we go around.
Michelle Mathis.
Karen,
Carl,
Star, Novella,
Katrina.
Of course, I'm Dwayne. We've met before because you've been to the other podcasts. There'll be other podcasts on other material as we grow. But we're talking about getting ahead, not just getting a job. And job search can be so frustrating. I mean, people don't call you back. People leave you hanging. People offer you a job and you get there and it's nothing like you expected. Who in the studio has had that happen? You get up and hands are going up. And in the studio, just Snap if you've had it happen. That way they can hear you online. There you go. So
Snapper
of
broke.
course, but your snapper's broke. Or we could clap, like clap on, clap off. But then that may make people's device that they're listening to us on clap off. I don't know.
Don't say Alexa anything.
Yeah. So we learned in the last session, if you are doing the typical traditional things to find work, if you're sending resumes, visiting employers, putting applications online, visiting and going to temp agencies, and each of those items represents an action. How many action items did we say you had to take to get a job? Anybody remember?
280 something.
It's 273 was a precise number, which is just unbelievably overwhelming, because are you going to get a job on the first face-to-face interview? Probably not. So you're looking at thousands of action items to find work, and then you get the job and it may not be what you wanted, or they may sense that it's a good match, so they know, well, I can pay them less. You say, would employers do that? Sure they would. It's not because they're evil, they're just trying to make money, and the personnel cost is the most expensive cost that most employers have. So the question becomes, what if today you were to lose your job, and instead of being on your own to find a job, you had a whole team of people who would collaborate with you to help you find work, to help you build your career? Would that make a difference?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, it would. And the question is, how do you do that? We mentioned in the last podcast that we had 50 people use this model that we're about to roll out here, and they were chronically unemployed, by the way, 2 years or more. 50 people, 6-week class that we did, 45 of them went to work, found work, but they used a different approach. And the key to that approach is having a plan. You've got to have a plan. In the studio, by snapping your fingers, how many of you have ever looked for a job and before you started, you wrote a plan for how you're going to do it? Anybody? One person. One person. So we're all learning. Did it help? How did it help you to have a plan, Michelle, versus just doing it?
Because I'm a list person.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to miss any steps. But the only reason I was able to develop a plan was because I had experience being an HR manager.
Okay.
And I'd seen so many people at a temp agency.
Yep.
So I had so many people coming in who didn't have a clue, really, and it wasn't any fault of their own. They
Right.
just found themselves in a situation where they were unemployed suddenly and didn't, weren't expecting it. So they didn't know what to do, and they came to us.
Yeah.
So that let me see I didn't want to be in that predicament. So I needed to have a
What's your
plan.
idea of a plan though, whenever you're,
Right.
What'd you say? What's your ideal of a plan? How did
Yeah.
your plan look?
Well, for me, I always made sure I had my resume in my back pocket.
Yeah.
So even when I had a job that I was enjoying, I had a job that, I wasn't expecting to go anywhere, I was still looking. I was still putting myself out there. And it came in, I'll tell you, it worked perfectly in an unexpected way, in that I had been working for a hospital, not here locally, but another hospital, for quite a while. And you never know how corporate life is going to be. So I had put my resume out on monster.com.
Mm-hmm.
I came into work one day after they had been doing a series of RIFs, reduction in forces. And I was the last one they riffed on that day after 3 days of riffs.
Now tell us what riff is.
It's reduction in force.
Okay.
Okay. So, which means basically corporate decided that they needed to make the business more profitable, so they got rid of a lot of positions.
Easiest way, the quickest
Right.
way to do it, but sometimes the most inhumane.
Right. So I had put this resume out. It had been probably over a year, maybe 2 years previously on monster.com, because I always believe in, keeping yourself out there. And this is not an exaggeration. I walked out of my office into the parking deck, and on my way through the parking deck, got a phone call from a headhunter who said, We found your resume on Monster. Are you interested? Or first of all, are you employed? And I said, not as of 15 minutes ago. And she kind of laughed and she said, well, we have a position we think you'd be good for. Are you interested in interviewing?
Wow.
And that was work that I had done, not even months, but years before.
If you had not had some sort of plan, would you have felt undue pressure to take that job if they offered it?
Oh, absolutely.
But the plan gave you confidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
The plan gave me confidence in knowing that one wasn't my only iron in the fire.
Yeah.
That I had additional things. Now, was I a little shook? Yeah, I was a little bit, but I'm not nearly to the point that I would have been, because I knew that, if that one didn't work out, I still had other things that I could check off my list as far as pursuing employment.
That's right.
And interestingly enough, within 6 weeks, less than 6 weeks, I was working at that job they called me about.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So-
Wow.
Yeah.
See, Carl, hang on. Look,
Was
see,
it-
2 years
was
later.
it a better
you,
job?
You hang on with that resume.
Oh yeah, it was great. I got to wear Converse and tennis shoes to work, and they had an office cat. What more could you want?
What? There you go. Office cat. I
Yeah.
mean, life.
And it paid better than what I was making at the hospital. So
More money, office cat, chucks to work, life is good.
yes,
So the plan is important. And what we have is a portal that we can send you. You go to the gateway, resourceconnectiongateway.com. We have a portal we can send you a link to that portal. You can build your plan. So you're not out there on your own. You can get some digital coaching. If you're local, we can give you a face-to-face mentor. But most of our people work, even in the local market, they work digitally, because then you don't have to transport and all those kinds of things. So here's what my friend Chad Kendall says about a plan. Chad is a pilot and a professor now at Metro State University in Colorado. He says this about flight plans. He says pilots put a lot of thought into their flight plans. They try to plan a route that's most efficient to get to the destination the safest and quickest way. Sometimes a straight line isn't the safest and quickest way to a destination. For us, the straight line has always been to send emails, write letters, send letters, call people, do this. Sometimes a straight line is not the best way, because the market has changed. And he goes on, he says, you may need to alter your route for bad weather, terrain, turbulence, all those kinds of things. This is the last little bit he said. You may need to get help from air traffic control in order to get a better plan. Who was it in the room who said reaching out for help was one of the hardest things? Who was that? Was that you, Star? So, Star, that's your air traffic control. What's interesting, we have often defined our gateway as air traffic control for human resources. When we speak to investors or funders or donors, we use that terminology. Chad had no way of knowing that. He actually told me this several years ago. But in either way, you may need to reach out for air traffic control to get a better plan. In that case, you may need more fuel for the journey than what you anticipated. And even after you put your best flight plan, things may change in flight. Weather may be different. Your spouse may lose benefits, and now you have to have a job with benefits. Or your spouse may get benefits, so now you can use those benefits, and you maybe could take a job you couldn't have taken
Or
before.
you get married and lose your benefits.
There you
because
go.
You're married.
That's right. So all kinds of things can happen. Weather may be different, turbulence, even air traffic control delays. So you may even alter your plan while in flight. All in all, a pilot's plan is only his or her best vision for the trip. It's not carved in stone, but leaving without it is like leaving without any plan at all. So what we're going to talk about for a little bit today is building that plan. What do you think, in the studio, the basis, it's one word, it starts with an R, is the basis for a good career plan? It's a one word basis. The base, the foundation, and it starts with an R. Any idea what it might be?
Research.
Research is part of it. You need some research. Karen, resources, and you're going to need some of those. Karen, tell your armadillo story, because that's research. Can you do that?
Michelle.
I mean Michelle. Excuse me. They look just alike.
Yeah, they look just alike. They look just alike.
So I was interviewing
Same
for
haircut.
a job at said hospital that riffed me. When I was originally interviewing, I did a lot of research, and I do this for every job that I've applied for. In that, I want to know about not only the background of the company and what they do, but the history of their leadership as much as possible. So I researched and found out that one of the executive team members was from Texas, and I am too. And so in that interview process, I was asked the question of if I could describe myself as any rodent, which would I be?
As a rodent.
As a rodent.
So in a professional job
Yeah.
interview, you were asked, will you describe yourself in terms of a rodent?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I said, knowing that this individual was from Texas, I said I would be an armadillo. Because that would may not relate to anybody else in the room, but would relate to that one individual.
Wow.
And so I was able to make that kind of connection.
And that's just research.
Yeah.
So research is a plank in that platform. What else do you think it might be? We heard resources. We heard research. Being realistic. Knowing I hear people a lot of times to say they're coming out of high school, they're coming out of college, and they say, I want to do this. And they think, well, do you have the educational credentials for that? Well, no, but that's what I want to do. Or I want to be a musician. Well, you know how hard it is to make a living as a musician. You know the difference between a 14-inch pizza and a full-time musician, don't you? A 14-inch pizza can feed a family of 4. Being a musician is hard. It's hard. You don't make a lot unless you're one of the very few tip top. So any other thoughts on what the basis of a good plan might be? Starts with an R.
Resume?
Resume is a piece of it. It's a piece of it.
I would think a reason.
Relationships.
Reason?
Yeah, a reason. Because
A reason?
you can, like, a lot of times, like I said, we've talked before, is that,
Is that it?
you need a job.
Yeah.
It ain't about what you want. You need a job. You got bills to pay. You got responsibilities. So you just going out trying to find a job.
So that's
lot of
a
people
great
look
point.
at that as that ability to try to figure out what you want. What you might think you want to do. That's a luxury for a lot of people.
That's
Because
right.
rent due in 30 days. You either gonna be homeless or not homeless.
That's
okay?
right.
And knowing what you want to do ain't always an option either.
And
There you go.
Like
what
knowing
we'll do
what you can do and what you're going to be happy doing is two completely different things.
on session 5 or 6, I can't remember which, we're going to ask you to identify 3 to 5 places that you either want to work or think you might want to work. So that plays into your reason. I won't get ahead of ourselves, but I'll tell you that that's the place most people get impelled and stop in their job search, career building. They can't, they're afraid to narrow it down. And we'll talk about that. So great point. Have you figured out the word? It's RELA. Are you getting it? What is it? Relationship.
Okay, Vanna White.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You got to have some relationships. And here's what we've heard about relationships and career building. Finish the statement for me. And you can finish it if you're listening at home. It's not what you know, it's who you know. I say that is bunk.
Yes.
Total bunk. It doesn't work. And people think that they have to hobnob or somehow get in good with the right people. That's not what gets you work. And if it does get you work, it won't keep you work.
Yep.
Because now you're indebted to that person. And there's a warped sense of loyalty there if you get your job that way. So just something to think about. It's not what you know, but who you don't. It's not who you know, but who you don't know well. It's not, and that right there,
Takes us to the next segment.
that takes us right there. That's our
I'm
2
out.
minute. That's our in studio.
Where's the water boy?
2 minute.
warning.
Yeah, that's our in studio 2 minute warning. That means we've reached the spot where we're 2 minutes away, and we know you were so caught up in this that you can't go to the bathroom. So we're saying step away from your phone if you're listening to it in 2 minutes, and we'll get you to the bathroom. All right, and the studio also. But we're going to talk about in the next session. We're going to open with it. It's not what you know, but whom you don't know well. And we're going to spend some time on that, and you're going to start developing your plan. When you come for the next session, have a piece of paper or something on which you can write, and a pen or some colored pencils or something in front of you, or a whiteboard, something you can write on. So we'll be back. Check us out at resourceconnectiongateway.com. You'll hear this whole series of podcasts on getting ahead, not just getting a job.